Welcome, Karen. So good to have you on our CEO mini podcast series.
Thank you. I really appreciate the invite.
Awesome. So, as I was saying, you're the podcast queen. You've done a few of these podcasts in your time. So, tell us more about that space, what you do in the podcast space.
Yeah, so I started podcasting a few years ago, actually, and it started with another business owner friend that I met through a business group, Lockie Gray, who's a co-founder of Yarno. And we got chatting, and it was like, oh, we both wanted to try podcasting, but we were kind of a bit frightened about diving in and then the commitment to do it if it wasn't for us. So we thought, well, safety in numbers, let's let's do it together. So we thought we'll just do like a limited series podcast, and that way that's done. And about the same time, I think it was COVID was hitting. So for my business, we're HR consultants. So it was a really busy time because everybody was just trying to work out, how do we get people out of the office? Like, we've never even thought about how we have our staff working from home. So I actually did a limited series podcast on my own as well, just around remote work and hybrid working. And I interviewed people that had different styles of work pre-COVID, and therefore, other businesses could learn from them about how to do it. So that was a couple of years ago now. And then with my own podcast, which is Find, Grow, Keep, I just thought, okay, I wrote out 100 problems that my target market have, which is businesses with under 100 employees. And then I thought, I'm just going to do a podcast episode on each of those problems. So I think I'm currently up to episode 72. So I was thinking the other day, what happens when I get to 100? Like, do I keep going? Are there another 100?
You're worried about not being able to keep up with it. So, yeah, you're clearly doing something right.
So I'll have to think about that eventually. And then the other one with Lockie, which is called Make It Work. Here we're now in our 4th season. So we'll probably do a 5th one. We haven't really spoken about it yet, but we both quite enjoy it. So I think, it doesn't work for everybody. It's like every medium, isn't it? Like, everyone has their different thing. But for me, I quite like talking. I love researching. And so doing the podcast actually forces me to research topics. And, the way that you learn something is actually through teaching others. So if I research something and then I have to talk about it on the podcast, then I'm reinforcing my own learning, which is what I really like about it as well.
I love that. So it sounds like all the podcasts that you've done are really around current topics or challenges that businesses are facing at that point of time. What are the current trends? What's topical at this point?
Yeah, well, the economy obviously is having an impact. So I think what I've seen is a bit of a shift. It's not a huge shift yet, but I think it'll get there from, I can't find anybody, there are no staff in the market. Australia closing their borders for a couple of years had a massive impact because we already had skills shortages, especially in healthcare and technology, construction, still problematic there, whereas other industries maybe not so much now. So the focus has gone to retention because, businesses are trying to, work out, well, how do we cut costs? How do we become more profitable? How do we weather through this? And so one way to do that is, to have staff staying with you for as long as possible, because as you know, the longer they stay with you, the more valuable they are. So now it's gone to, okay, well, how do we retain people? And we can't compete just on dollars with bigger organizations. So what else can we do? So that's one of the big shifts that I've seen this year, actually. And I think the other one is, I was talking to someone the other day for my podcast about remote working. So I think a lot of organizations are still struggling with hybrid work, and what does that look like for our business? Because as easy and perhaps as tempting as it is to have everyone back in the office, you can't retain people that way. You can't attract people that way. So, so still trying to work out, okay, well, how do we stay productive in hybrid working, and how does that work for us properly? I think the other one is artificial intelligence. That's really just become a lot more mainstream this year, hasn't it? So, how do we use that in the organization, again, to help with productivity and innovation, help our businesses to survive?
Absolutely. No, all three super, super relevant. In fact, I was speaking with one of our BackBone members, Paul Collins from Skills TX, and their software does exactly that. It's all about how do you retain people without having it to be connected to the dollars, because there's
Yes.
always a ceiling to that, and it's all around having the right career development plans and providing more transparency on career uh,
Mm.
growth, and they're definitely seeing that helping. But speaking of hybrid workplaces, I mean, I feel like it's a new norm. Everyone I speak with, I mean, whether you're in corporate or whether you run your own business, I feel like people now don't always live in the major cities, or
Mm.
everyone's moved
Yeah.
outside of and goes into the city rather once
Mm.
a week. Are you hearing that a lot as well?
Yeah, I think it depends where the business started originally. So if they were based in the CBD, then, yes, how do you get people back into the, the CBD again? No matter which city you're in. And I think actually Melbourne much more difficult because they had such longer periods of lockdown. So I've noticed actually quite a big difference between Melbourne and Sydney. Likewise Brisbane, because they didn't really have those big lockdowns. So I think it is slightly different across those cities on the eastern seaboard anyway. But what I find that people are struggling with is how do we use the time in the office? So
Mm.
it's very easy to say, Kavita, you have to be in the office 2 days a week because we think that that's good for collaboration and cooperation. And then you spend those 2 days either in constant online meetings because half of your team aren't in the office, and
Right.
so then you're turning around going, well, what am I here for? Or you're spending them in meeting rooms, but you've still got 2 days of full on meeting rooms, and so you're just exhausted and feel like you don't get anything done, which is why you hear people say I get so much more done at home.
So,
um
well, right. For most people, the
yeah.
commute takes a big chunk of their time.
Exactly. So then you're commuting into the office, and, even if you live 20 minutes away, the commute's going to be 40 minutes, by the time that you wait for the bus or the train and you walk and what have you. So let's say at a minimum, it's probably close to an hour and a half a day that most people have to commute. I know that for a lot of people, it's a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
And then you go to work and you feel like, well, I could do this at home. What am I sitting here for? So that's what I'm finding people are struggling with. It's not that they haven't said, yeah, oh, you have to do 1 day, we have to do 2 days. It's more that, well, what do we actually do with this time? And what does that look like? And then the organizations that have just said, oh, we'll leave it all up to you, employees really struggle with that, because then it becomes a bit of, well, am I going to be treated differently if I'm not in the office? Because if I'm not seen, it's hard for me to get a promotion. We like the people that we see more often. That's just
There's
human
probably an element
condition.
of truth in that as well.
Yeah, when we have new people starting with us, they actually really benefit from being with people that are more experienced. But for the more experienced people, that's just a headache to them to have to be with new people. So there's just a lot of those types of dynamics, I think, that are still to be worked through, which seems a bit silly because we've been doing this for a couple of years now. But I think it's just constantly evolving, and organizations are trying to work out like what's the best for us. And I think that's the key, is that every business is going to have a different what's best for us. Yeah.
Absolutely. So tell us more about Amplify HR, and how you're helping organizations with, I'm guessing, a whole range of problems outside of hybrid workplace.
Yes.
But yeah, tell us more about Amplify HR.
Yeah, so I started the business in 2016, and I've always really enjoyed smaller businesses. I've worked in bigger businesses, and I actually worked with a state-owned corporation. When I started, I thought I'm just going to do like a 12-month contract, and then I ended up there for, I think it was 7 years. So, um, and that was
Good.
it was 3,500 staff. I was managing a team of about 25 HR professionals. So, so I've kind of done that very large, down to being the only HR person in the business. And I think the thing with HR is that, depending on people's experiences, like most service offerings within a business, like finance or IT, etc., you can have varying reputations, right? And I've come across a lot of what I would consider very poor HR as well. So the reason for the business was to say, okay, if you're a smaller business, if you've got basically under 100 employees, you still have an awful lot going on in that business. And you need to have someone that actually understands people and culture, and how do we build a culture, and what are the processes that we need and the systems that we need. But you can't afford to bring in an HR person. So that's really where we see it is that we provide that outsourced HR service. And and that's across the spectrum of, we're building rewards and recognition programs or career paths. We're doing the HR issues, if you like, which I hate the term of, but because I just think, humans, we shouldn't be issues, but
Priorities or something.
yeah.
Feel better.
I know, but so many people use the term. It's the same as the term HR. Actually, I really dislike that as well. But that's what people use, so it's hard to move away from. But
Although I
if
feel like people
you've
are
got,
changing, it's changing more to people and culture.
yes,
Um, yeah, the new names that are popping up. So
yeah,
HR,
there's people and culture, there's employee experience, which is probably the closest one actually for me. I think. Sorry, I'm not going to go on a rant about this, but I do just need to say that. The thing that bothers me about people and culture is that I found that when organizations use that terminology, the managers will use that as a bit of an umbrella and a shield. Oh, well, that issue, therefore, has to do with people, so that belongs over there. That's not mine. Or, we need to build the culture. Well, that's not me. That's that team over there. They're people and culture. They need to do that. And I think it just absolves people of that responsibility, which to me is completely incorrect, because the entire organization is responsible for culture and every people manager is responsible for people. So
that's a really
that's my
interesting
issue.
perspective. I never thought of it that way. So what would be, in the ideal world, what would be a good rebranding of
Oh,
HR
I
culture?
wish I knew, right? Like this is and I think this is what the profession has struggled with. Because originally it was called personnel, which is also a terrible name, and then it became human resources, and then we got people and culture. So that's why I think like employee experience is probably the closest. Like I've heard about, chief people happiness officer, and I don't like that, because I don't think it's necessarily about happiness.
Yeah.
Like happiness is so important, but if someone's really struggling with mental health and they're going to go and have a chat with the happiness officer, like that just doesn't sound right to me. But that's just my perspective. um,
Good point. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, so off my rant. So I think that there was an opportunity there to say, okay, well, we can help smaller businesses to put in proactive, contemporary HR within their business to help them attract and grow and retain their people, but in an affordable way without having to add to their headcount. And our purpose is to create workplaces that engage and inspire, because for us it's about making the workplace somewhere that people do feel engaged and they're inspired to come to work, because if you're doing that, that's going to seep into every part of your life, and we know that when people are very unhappy or dissatisfied at work, they're more likely to drink more, turn to drugs, go into depression, and that's going to impact on their family. It's going to impact on our whole society. So that's why I've always, really loved what I do, because to me, it's about the workplace is a huge part of our lives. And if we can make that a decent place, even if it's not somewhere that engages and inspires, even if it's just decent, then that's going to help our whole society. And it's just about enabling people to be their best selves, really, and not have to feel that they have to be someone different at home than they are at work.
I can feel your passion. Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
That passion just coming through. Well, speaking of names, what's the story behind Amplify HR?
Oh,
Why did you
gosh,
choose that
it's such
name?
a boring story. Why did you pick that one?
Oh, but I'm inherently curious about how people come up with names of their companies. So it's something I always ask, and I realize I've never asked you. So
Yeah, I wish I had a more interesting story. I probably should make one up, but it was honestly just me just sitting down going, okay, what are some words that kind of go into what I'm trying to do? And going to things like Word Hippo and just playing around with lots of different words. And then I ended up with a short list, and then I just put it onto, I think it's probably on Facebook at the time, to all of my friends and said, hey, vote. So what do you think?
we did a bit of a focus group. Love that.
I'm all about collaboration. And then just checking that it wasn't taken by somebody else, and it wasn't, and it was the highest voted, so that was it. That's what we became.
Well, truly collaborative way of coming up with the name. Oh,
So
speaking of collaboration, I mean, What role, if any, have collaborations and partnerships played in your growth?
Oh, look, I think they're vital for any small business. And for me, because it is just me as well. So I think if you have a business partner, maybe it's slightly different. I've spoken to some friends that have business partners, and so they've got someone they can constantly whinge to. Whereas I don't have that. So you've got to, for my mind, you've really got to find other business people that share similar values, that are happy to have those open conversations, and to just pick up the phone and just go, you know what, why are we doing this again? This was a really hard day, or whatever was going on, and just kind of pick each other up. So I think that's important. And then I think in terms of collaboration and partnerships, again, it's about lifting each other up, because together we're better. I know that that's a very old cliche, but it's true, because small businesses, there's a lot of us. And there's got to be ways that we show people our value, because just going into Google and trying to find something, nobody wants to do that. So we can collaborate and partner with other businesses. Then we know, okay, I trust this person, so I can go, hey, you should go and join BackBone, because I can see that you don't have any other business groups that you're really in, or hey, you love business groups, why don't you give this one a go? Because I know Kavita, I know what you're like, I know what your value set is, and do you know what I mean? So I think that makes it easier. And then you've obviously got partnerships where you can start to go down that financial route as well, which I know can be very profitable for people. For our business, we don't really do the financial partnerships, because I think because we're such a one-on-one service with an HR consultant in a business, and I don't ever want my consultants to feel like they're in a position that they have to recommend
Yeah.
something because they're going to get a bonus or whatever, versus they're recommending it for the right reasons. But I certainly know, like, software providers, it's fantastic to have those types of partnerships where they're getting leads in, or they're getting different financial benefits through that. So uh, in my opinion, you can't run a business on your own. You've got to be around other people.
Say, right, it takes a village to raise a child. I
Yeah.
feel like business is very, very similar. And you're right. I don't think you need to have the financial partnerships in place.
Mm.
I think it sometimes means more when you're willing to vouch for another business without any financial incentive.
Yes.
And so I like to refer to them as alliances. And I think
Yeah.
alliances is what helps all of us grow.
Yes.
I know it's cliched, so together we are better, but it's true.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, we say that at Backbone. You've heard me say that a million times.
Yeah.
When we all work together, we all rise together.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we all rise to varying levels.
Absolutely. And I think it's not that difficult to find people that have a similar target market to you, but not competing products and services. And so, when you can identify those and have just open conversations with those business owners, and you find, okay, we've got similar value sets, then that becomes an easy thing to do. And I guess going back to where we started off with podcasting, that's where I found a great way to actually build relationships with people as well, is to invite them onto the podcast. And as you're doing today, asking me all these questions, because it's like, oh, we haven't had a chance to actually have that discussion yet. So that's been really great as well, to meet people through that, and to be able to collaborate in that way as well.
Well, I had one final question for you, but I feel like you've already answered it, but I'll ask it anyway.
Okay.
I mean, you've talked about so many amazing things. You've been successful in the corporate sector, very successful as an entrepreneur. You've got your successful podcasts, multiple of them. What advice would you have for anyone who's starting out and in the early stages of growing and launching their business?
I think you have to be really clear on what you're trying to achieve.
Mm.
So are you starting a business because you want to create a massive conglomerate someday? Or, are you starting a business because you want to have flexibility and have more time with your family? I think knowing, like, what's the end game is super important. And I think if you don't have that, very clear, this is why I'm doing it,
Yeah.
then there's no way to understand what your purpose is. So I think once you know what the outcome, so for me, this was about me having time with my family and flexibility and I guess autonomy and independence as well, if we're going to be honest, right? So the idea of going back into a situation where I'm doing board papers, like it's just that's not appealing to me whatsoever. So if that's kind of like, okay, that's the outcome that I want, then I've got to go to, well, what's actually the heart of the business? What's the purpose of the business? Why am I doing this? Because we're not doing it for money. So yes, that's an outcome of it, but what's actually the purpose? So if the purpose is, okay, I want to create workplaces that engage and inspire, then I'll put those two things together and go, okay, now how do I do that? So because I think a lot of people, can sometimes forget that actually there's a lot more to this. And if you don't have that kind of guiding light, that heart, that passion, as running a business can be very hard. It can be very disheartening at times. And so that's the bit that's going to keep you going. Yeah.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think having that North Star and, it's shining clearly, it not only helps you get out of bed every morning,
Yes.
but also I think communicating that with, whoever you're working with, whether they're customers, partners, alliances, I think just brings everyone along for the journey as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, great.
Absolutely, because that then becomes your marketing message as well, right? And that's what people are interested in. Simon Sinek is the perfect example of, how he
I
started
love
to
that name.
explain this to people. People
Don't
buy
talk about what
why
you
you
do,
do it.
tell us why you do it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's true. It's exactly what we do. If I sit here and I say, oh, well, we're HR consultants and blah, 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 there's probably, thousands of other people that would say that same thing. But someone else can hear me speak and go, oh, you know what? Yeah, that's important to me as well. And that is one of the filters that we use when we're hiring people or, when we're having sales conversations is, and I say to people, we will get you compliant to the legislation, but that's not what we're here for. So if you just want compliance, if you just want to cover your butt, if you're not interested in building, a great culture and building up your people, we're not the right people for you. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned through running a business is sometimes you do have to say no, and sometimes you have to say no to customers, sometimes you have to say no to candidates. So again, if you have that really strong, this is why I'm doing it, it'll help you to say no.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, look, love chatting with you. I feel like the time's absolutely flown by. So look forward to speaking with you again soon. But yeah, thank you for today.
Thank you. I'll see you on the next BackBone event.